Welcome everyone. This is, I think, what, sixth or seventh time we're doing the roundtable, monthly roundtable. So welcome. My name is Marco. I'll be moderating it. So super quickly, if you haven't had a chance, please introduce yourself via chat window, your name, company, location, role, possibly. Just say hi to your peers. So with that, we are going to quickly do an introduction to TechKnowCon for some of you who may be new. So many years ago, when I was at Twitter, I was looking for my tribe, and at the time I met Jenny Blackburn from Salesforce and Rajan from LinkedIn. So then a couple of us started then something called TechLearn that eventually morphed into TechKnowCon. Back in 2018, we did the first annual at LinkedIn and 2019 annual at Twitter. And then this year we moved it to Zoom, so it's all happening online. However, now it's monthly. So this is actually a photo of many of us who are here, taken at Twitter in San Francisco in October. So with that, really quickly, we have some community guidelines. The goal of this is to sort of establish a safe place in which you feel like you can share yourself with your peers. So essentially, be a good citizen, respect people's privacy. So if you have email addresses, things like that, make sure you ask first before sharing with others. We don't solicit. So if you're a provider of services, please don't solicit business. And there's also a governance behind TechKnowCon. We created a mini board with Katie, Katie from Twitter, Rajan from LinkedIn, Chris from Microsoft, Andrew from Shopify, and myself. And there's a published code of conduct, which is basically what we just talked about. So with that, if you want to connect with the community between roundtables, these are various places you can do that. So LinkedIn, Twitter, and web. However, probably the most active one is the Slack community, and you will be getting a feedback survey and the link to the techknowcon.slack.com where you can freely sign up. There's no restrictions, so you can just sign up for the Slack for TechKnowCon Slack.com. So with that, we'll move on to Kate. So Kate is with Shopify. She's going to be talking about how to deliver workshops remotely. And some of you may remember Kate from TechKnowCon at Twitter last year, where we talked about, I believe it was about conferences and doing large conferences internally at scale. So with that, I'll pass it on to Kate.
Yeah, I think I mostly talked about a conference, but also for anyone who was there, they probably remember more me talking about like mushrooms and rhizomes and just a whole lot of silly nonsense. But I'm happy to still be around and talking with everybody. So hi, my name's Kate Brennan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm in the middle of switching over my screen right now. And if I could hear a couple of positive comments, thumbs up, or all good, that would help.
All good.
And remember to
yes.
turn your sound. As well.
See, part of that too is building up some of the positivity and time for us to chat. So, hey, this is going to be a talk about delivering workshops remotely. I'm more used to doing a workshop than I am a talk, so I'm going to try to figure out how to break some of my habits to be a little more conversational and give a talk instead and save it for the Q&A. So we can call this delivering workshops remotely. I've been a remote employee for over 2 years, so well before the quarantine times, as a lot of people have been thinking, and delivered a number of workshops, including Public Speaking 101, how to build a workshop. I've done a negotiation workshop and a handful of others for people from a remote circumstance. And I think that a lot of the time there's concern that, oh, a workshop is so hands-on, it's got certain requirements and it can't happen remotely, and I'm keen to show that that's not true. So the wordier version to break all of Stuart's suggestions are to continue going on with how I learned to stop worrying and love the distance. Kind of reinforcing the idea of his talk about clarity and brevity, our job as technical educators is guiding and crafting learning in order for it to be very clear and determine the depth of understanding for people. Most of this for us is going to be in professional development, but I believe that kind of approach works for any kind of educator, figuring out what the essential skill and the clearest message is for someone to take away. So I'd love to see some chatter in the chat. How many of your programs have stopped? How many have changed? What is going on? And what things are new for you? I'm popping back to the window because it's a little tricky for me to see right now some of those responses. It looks like some of you, are programs still running? Has anything frozen since we've entered distributed working time or quarantine time? Things have changed, but they're still running. Nothing stopped. It's a blend. It seems like it's a change to how we deliver content. Oh, hi, Vince. A lot of changes, a lot of new things. I think a shift to things not being in person, some sort of combination of that change and that blend is pretty common for people. They're taking something that was live and in person and trying to figure out how you modify that and make it into something remote, which can be a really big challenge. Not forever stopping some things, just some challenges with budget or all being in person. That adds up to some of what I've seen in experience at Shopify, my previous employer, as well. So we keep talking again about this huge change to our environment and the shift to how we have to teach and present things. But to be honest, a significant part of our roles as technical educators is continuing to update and meet the needs and the requirements of our learners inside of companies. Because we're always adapting and we're doing updates, we're figuring out what's the best way for this information to be consumed. We're partnering with SMEs, our subject matter experts, in order to figure out what is the best method for something to be understood. We can do that just as well talking to them over a call or in chat and figuring out the way we're going to consume and then making an update, recognizing that it's a completely different approach as we would in person. It just seems a little more abrupt right now. So we take the program, we just say we can't adapt to this, we're getting rid of it, and we're just going to approach something very fresh. We can take this and do a brand new approach to the same content that we already have. Just because we delivered in person or in one format doesn't mean that we can't shift to another. So I would say we always want to approach a remote workshop in a different way than we would an in-person or live workshop, recognizing that it's different and reshaping it to meet the objectives. I've got here a couple of photos of examples of some of the past programming at Shopify. We've had live in-person conferences for our technical employees. There's a number of one-off workshops that have run internally. There's regular weekly or monthly sessions to give developer talks or a data town hall and update people on technical topics. As you can see, a majority of these things are either all together in person, they're done in a group in a classroom, a talk is generally being delivered on a stage in an office, but Shopify has actually just gone fully remote company and will be reducing the number of offices that they have and staying fully remote into the future, even past 2021. So I mentioned a couple of those examples. I would love to hear if you could unmute and shout out some guesses. I'm going to share what each of these programs are, and I would love if you could ask if it is stopped, if it is changing, or if it's still going. So our developer talks were a weekly session where we would have people sign up. It was a little bit more grassroots and then organized into some themes for any developer at the company to give a talk about a topic that they were interested in teaching. We had a team that could help prepare for some public speaking, do some organizing and review of the slides, but it was largely self-developed. Do you think that this program has stopped, is undergoing changes, or has been ditched for something completely fresh?
It's undergoing changes.
I think we have a couple of potential bias here too, because I know we've got a few Shopifyers in the crowd. Okay, we're gonna pause on that one and think undergoing some change. We had a 1-week on-site onboarding program called R&D Camp, where we brought all of our technical roles, development, product management, data, and our UX roles in person to an office to do a crash course on how our product development teams work all together, as well as our project systems. So it was a 1-week on-site. Any guesses on what's going on with that? I'll infer that we've all got a little bit of an idea. And then we had our R&D summit, which was some of the photos you saw before of a conference for all roles, not just people onboarding, but anyone within our technical departments at Shopify across different lines. So those 4 categories again, to give talks and workshops aligned to higher level goals set by our leadership. What do we think is happening with this conference?
Virtual?
Virtual. Any other guesses?
Stopped?
Stopped. Virtual or stopped. Those probably seem like the 2 natural guesses. We're not, fortunately Shopify is not encouraging any co-located education right now. So looking at the approach, our developer talks, that weekly session, is temporarily on pause, but is planned to be coming back. The developer talks had high production value from our AV team. There was a lot happening in person. People would just kind of connect and figure out an agenda. We're working on figuring out, as time is a little more precious and people are working on developing stronger focus while they're working at home, how do we make live workshops and live talks have a stronger agenda? So that's on pause and under development right now to come back. We've changed our R&D camp to a program called R&D Discovery. So we eliminated a 1-week in-person program and instead developed a 1-month-long distributed part-time program. So that was an instance where we just scrapped R&D camp altogether. That should almost, I probably should have put that in a strike through. And then for our summit, for now, it seems to be that it's not going to be coming back, at least in its current incarnation. Because of the quarantine, it was decided that this isn't the best time for us to focus on how to modify and to do something of that scale. We'd rather invest in some of these smaller opportunities like talks, like onboarding, and some of our core offerings, while people are still getting used to how to work remotely instead of tackling a larger ambitious project. So one of our educational programs just completely out of mind for the next little while. So I think that that's an example just in terms of how things changed at Shopify. The odds of what your company needs to learn and what the goals for what you're going to accomplish are, I have every reason to believe that they are different from last year. All of those examples I just shared with you show that Shopify's priorities compared to having a multi-million conference or running regular talks and figuring out strategy and focus has just flipped upside down. So I expect that all companies are really reassessing what is the value that we get from our live education right now. Well, one of the main approaches, and this is similar, I guess, to our story approach, but a little bit rougher, is to zoom back and think about our objectives, and can those still be accomplished in a useful way remotely? My approach to this is we use or do X in order to Y, which results in Z. That type of analysis of what you're doing can help you realize if an in-person exercise or session can still be done or how it can be modified instead for a remote experience. If we distill it back down to the objective and step back from what the execution previously was, we're much more likely to develop a program or a workshop that exists specifically for a remote approach. So it's going to be useful, and when we get to our breakouts, I'm going to encourage everyone to take a pause and think about your own sessions, what the learning objective is, or if there are other objectives as well. Are those goals still being met by the modified version of the program? Not is the same topic being taught or the curriculum, but distilling back to what is being used in order to do an action which will have a long-term benefit or change. So I mentioned that R&D camp to R&D discovery. Just for simplicity, I'm going to refer to it as onboarding. The change at Shopify was that 1 week on-site program, which had been established in late 2017, had been running for quite a long time. I joined Shopify, I was with them for about 3 years, and remember our first instance of running the program back when it was a 2-week-long beta. It was getting refined and run every single month with groups of new hires for over 2 years in order to refine the experience being offered in Ottawa and Toronto, with the two main focus points being technical education on a person's craft, as well as understanding how projects were being delivered. So we really got focused on the execution and refining how we were delivering that exact approach. In order to get the same material done, we zoomed out and we ended up going with a month-long approach, because using that X to Y in order Z, people needed to explore Shopify's product in order to have context for learning the company's technical strategies, resulting in faster aligned work joining their teams. That was the goal of both the original 1 week on-site program, exploring and taking time together to then use what they saw in the product to go into their craft learning. That way they understood how their craft related to the product and how their craft was executed at the company for faster aligned work. Nothing about this type of goal or this specific focus really requires being in person in order to be together. This understanding of the product, and in order to learn how a craft is done, or even the development of important connections and relationships to work with stakeholders, could all be done to produce faster and aligned work. That was the ultimate result, continuing on and being done at the company by everyone else who also hasn't gone through a new onboarding and is learning how to align more closely. Zooming back out, taking a little bit of a breath. We decided to continue to offer a lot of live education through this and do workshops in order to accomplish the results. It was going to be different. We weren't going to have everyone co-located together. We weren't going to have travel and all of kind of the energy and the excitement of that. But could I hear a few shouts of things that you think are the strengths of workshops?
Higher fidelity.
Mm-hmm.
Ability to ask questions live.
Live opportunity for sure. What are some of the things you've found beneficial or seen your learners do?
You could customize it based on the needs of that audience that's attending.
Yeah, being responsive, absolutely. Well, here's a few of the things. We did mention, being all together, having synchronous learning of having the group learn at once and have peers. We also have the ability for there to be explicit, dedicated time for someone to learn rather than finding how to kind of scoop out a period or how long is this topic going to take me. The ability, again, for it to be verbal, for people to engage, ask questions, have it be modified and adapt. And also just the idea that it's generally more active than reading over documents, watching a video, and requires you to be a lot more present and focused. So all of these things can still be done when you're doing things remotely. We haven't lost the ability for there to be people dialed in all together, for there to be a focused time block, for us to be able to chirp up even if we're not quite as used to it, and there's a number of strategies you can employ to encourage that, and for people to be doing activities. So if you define your user and you figure out who that learner is, then you refine that objective of what you're trying to get done. You can still work with the strength of that format. So what are the strengths? If we're together on a call, we can really focus to continue to foster community. People are always saying, oh, it's just great because you're all together, you build relationships, you're doing these things. There's a number of ways that you can still focus on building community. I think Marco does a great job encouraging everybody to throw their name out there and do introductions at the beginning, having breakouts and building discussion, figuring out some energetic, goofy things like, maybe throwing a GIF out there can get some higher engagement and have people work in one group. Eye contact, this is a bit of a funny one for both really the facilitator, but also people attending. If you make eye contact with the camera lens and you don't compete with what's on the slide, how is everyone looking, how am I looking, you just don't get concerned about the other appearances and you feel a bit more present and connected for your learners. It might seem a little funny to you to be treating this as somebody else's pupil, but it goes a long way with feeling a bit more personable when you're the one facilitating and speaking. If we're going to take the time to be live on a call and have our voice unmuted, our cameras on, all be together at once despite whatever situation is going on at your home, we ought to have that happening. Let's take advantage of it and ditch the slides, which is funny to say during a talk right now, and get to actually see each other and have that engagement. Do you want a throwback just because I can't help myself? Isn't it first through the voice that one becomes animal, which is Deleuze really highlighting, you're gonna be energetic, you're gonna get invested and figure out what benefit, what you're going to say, and be rooted when you're talking to people, when you're doing that type of active engagement still. And you can do that with a voice. So basically what he's saying is ditch the slides. The recognition with all of that to just see someone and be talking to them does involve saying we're not in an office together. you don't know why my wall and my hair and these plants and everything is green. You don't even know if I'm in my home or my house, and we don't all know each other just yet. So taking some time to set expectations when you're delivering a workshop, focus on workarounds, and be someone who is managing operations to be flexible, and think about what the explicit goal is, reinforcing again and again, will help you. The flexibility is more important than someone having all of the materials available and staying to a specific time box. We should probably start encouraging work in advance again for certain sessions. Working ahead of time can bring you to the call and to the workshop much more prepared to have that lively and active discussion together. I always like to think about it of people that show up for working meetings can be incredibly valuable. When we're learning and we want better comprehension, understanding, we want to have a debate of possibly different stances or different approaches. We want to do that out loud, and we don't want to be looking down at a window, down at paper, and stay together. So if we're going to be on a call, let's make the most of it. I've got a quick video if we want, but just in the instance of time, I'll share this for people to watch afterward. But Shopify, again, has gone fully remote in order to encourage people to really work from anywhere and have that fluidity, which also means that the technical educators there have recognized they need to build in a higher degree of flexibility, a blend of saying, we won't always have all of your time. I can't constantly present to you on screen or build your full day. It's far too dense to ask you to sit and listen. So sometimes the question is, why do a workshop? How to teach remotely and how to teach a workshop has really brought me to the question when I took a pause, is that sometimes it shouldn't be a workshop. So I got a little shout out to Medium is the Message, which originally got printed as Medium is the Massage, which was a publishing industry typo that McLuhan really liked. There's a whole funny side story. But sometimes the workshops aren't the best thing when we've entered a remote world. We want to consider that it limits the availability. There's trouble with time zones or figuring out, am I available to do this call? Do I have a doctor's appointment? Do I need to go somewhere else? Sometimes when things are verbal, or even the fact that this is going to be a video, means that there's less that's documented on paper, and people need to be able to give that focused time in order to learn the topic. And active work is often a lot easier with guidance and, as someone called out before, the ability to ask questions and be adapted to. So these are limitations, and delivering education live is often something that we feel really comfortable and really familiar with, but there are so many other approaches and so many things that the team at Shopify has started to blend into live educational experiences, like threading a finding that you got from a document or video, sharing what the most interesting thing was in the wiki, watching this video or taking this course at your own pace. So we should consider things that aren't live education or how to deliver a workshop remotely when it's not clicking a really good opportunity. There's a lot of formats. So that was going to be my point, to encourage us to break out and consider at least 2 ways that some of your content can be delivered. How would you do it in a workshop? And what's one other way that you can consider to do remote education that isn't a workshop for the same topic? And that's my buddy Marshall McLuhan still. I know we're getting close on time though, so sorry for running long. More than happy to take questions.
That was great, and I love the reference to Medium is the Message. And it's one of my favorite McLuhan quotes. So thank you for that. Cool. So with that, we're probably not going to have time for a breakout. However, we can give you the time to ask questions. So any questions for Kate around the alternative ways of delivering, I guess, education in lieu of work from home, remote? What are the alternatives? What are people exploring? Anything like that, so we can have live Q&A and then and then we'll wrap it up. So questions, comments, anything else for Kate? Feel free to ask in chat, or if you want to ask via, feel free to unmute as well. I guess I'll ask, so what are the investments that you see people are doing, I guess specifically Shopify or other companies? Like what are some of the experiments or investments happening right now?
I think some of the greatest experiments are recognizing, again, that maybe we delivered content previously in a certain form or way that limited our viewpoint, and we can just throw it out, think about what the goal is, and see how to deliver it otherwise. And a lot of the time, it really still is a live workshop. It's just the fact that the exercise we made or needing a certain person to deliver a talk might not always work for us. So we're exploring opportunities of having certain people pre-record the opening talk, and then we still go into a presentation with a facilitator that's not the SME, talking about some of the other pieces and having people go through an exercise. We're doing a lot of blended experiences where it's still a live workshop, or you do a self-paced exercise and then you hop into a workshop call together instead of, say, silent work or turning off your camera. I think those combinations of figuring out how to deliver a experience that I would still call a workshop have given people a lot more freedom to go elsewhere and work on their schedule as they can.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is that it's not just taking what was live in the physical offices and moving it online. That's not the solution. And then it's also not the solution just moving to content only, because you lose the sense of community and this asking questions that Jasmine mentioned, and like ability to interact with one another. So it's some combination of the two. And so what I'm hearing is around blended learning. And then Andrew also asked the questions about experimenting with the flipped classroom, which is essentially that, putting some content out there ahead of time, and then having the live experience be less about the content dump and more about the interaction, question asking, and resolving issues and things like that.
Absolutely. One example that I'm thinking of that applies to what Andrew said is a negotiation workshop that had been developed. We had lots of things about what your communication style is, if you're someone who is more assertive, if you are someone who comes across as aggressive or submissive, figuring out how to kind of align and where you're at, and some strategies that say, okay, if you're pulling forward too much, how do we pull back? If you're being more reserved, how can you pull more forward? Considering some of these approaches. And then when people got onto the call, they had heard and considered some strategies. They had already reflected about where they were at, and they could just share true experiences of, how do I negotiate with my product manager to get this in the release? How do I get my job title changed? They had done some reflecting on their own approach, and it became a beneficial session for them to work through an actual result they were looking to achieve.
Got it. And so Jasmine was asking actually a good question. So you mentioned how you moved your R&D onboarding to become, as opposed to a week long, a month long. And so to Jasmine's point, so how does that change the fact that we are sort of used to getting that engineer up and running within a week, and now it's going to be a month? So it's not just the change in education, it's also a change on the hiring process and getting, somebody up to speed. So how do you account for that as well, I guess?
Yeah, awesome point, Jasmine. In terms of people and their worries and their expectations, a significant amount of the work for the program management of this was working with leadership, not just senior leadership, but the leads that we're hiring in, any new hire, and building Slack channels with them for each cohort, explaining this is what they're doing this week, this is how it's going, and doing that both pre-program during the development of it, as well as live during that group's onboarding. So we'd say, They're getting their environment set up today. Why don't you double check with them if they have all the programs they need? This is what we're giving them. Or today, everyone is going to respond to a ticket from support, which is a real thing that we do. So they're learning the product hands-on. Ask them if they've gotten to explore your area of the product, or share with them something that they could look into. So we're actually activating the leads to engage back as well in order to get a better level of depth, I suppose, by taking our time on learning. And quite a bit of it is also only taking, say, half the day for the whole month. So a lot of expectation management, working with people to explain that not only do we have to change what the program is, but we have to change how we're working. People aren't working in the same way, so we can't have the same expectation on time and delivery. So we're really trying to go to saying, don't be worried about going so fast. A month at this point is fast when you're onboarding to a company where you haven't met anybody before and you're sitting at a desk in the corner of your house.
Thank you, Kate. So what I'm hearing is that it's not just changing how we do learning and development, it's also how the rest of the business changes, and then being in sync with the rest of the business, so that we're not just changing how onboarding happens, but how recruiting somebody onto the team happens as well. So yeah,